Hey, Brittany.
Hi,
Hi.
how are you?
Oops, I have to turn my volume up. How's it going?
Lovely.
Wobbly.
Yeah.
Excellent. No one said anything, but I accidentally, since it's just us two on here right now, accidentally um put in, what is that? No. Cancel. Um Accidentally put in the February reconciliation.
And nobody caught it.
No.
Waiting.
So I was like, okay. So now I've got to try to go in there and update it. Quickly.
Eh.
Let's see. Oh, no. Don't want that. Okay.
Okay. And so the board's going to need to look at some of the things that we need to do as a board financially. One of these things I know that is on a lot of our parents' minds are tuition reimbursement for kindergarten, and the other one being pay to participate. The board needs to look at everything. We plan to have a discussion. Mr. Yanagos, you had a good suggestion, which was to have a work session separately about these topics. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that as we finally got some guidance from the governor's office that we're going to be out of traditional school for the rest of the year, and then OHSAA, in terms of pay to participate, has officially declared the spring season to be canceled. We just need time to kind of compile a lot of that data to see where we are and put all that stuff together, and then have probably a more robust conversation where we don't have as many time constraints, perhaps. So I was thinking maybe a work session would be a good way to go. If everyone was in agreement with that, we can set a date now or in the future, probably early May, maybe.
That sounds good to me.
Do we,
As the rest of the board.
is there going to be enough time for, given that the governor's direction was just a few days ago, districts across the state are all going to be dealing with this same thing. I know not everybody has pay to participate, but some do. Some have tuition for full day kindergarten. So, do we need to give a little more runway to have this kind of settle in and have legal people kind of weigh in and figure out, what are we allowed to do, and what are our options? What are other districts doing? Is ODE giving any direction on this? If there's constraints that come up, is this something that the state legislature may you know, grant some exemptions, just like when they closed schools, right? They suspended third grade reading guarantee and state testing, and they did a number of things when they passed legislation quickly. So I guess before we meet and we start making decisions, you know, is it possible that some changes may be coming and the dust hasn't settled yet on what districts will commonly do in this scenario?
So the state is not going to come down on that because that's really a local decision, like how we handle supplementals. It's based on your CBA. I have gotten 2 legal opinions on this. Superintendents around the state have been talking about this for months because when school closed the first time, that was the first thing that people asked about, even though you know, athletics wasn't officially canceled until Monday. So there's been a lot of survey data. We have data. We know what other cities are doing. Everyone was kind of on pause until we knew for sure whether or not sports were going to be able to take place in this spring in any way, shape, or form. Because that decision was just made on Monday that we were not going to finish the sports seasons, now everyone is finalizing what they were doing. So we have a spreadsheet of about 45 different school districts on what they're doing in terms of supplementals. We are one of few districts on pay to participate. We are also one of few districts that actually has pay for full day kindergarten. I've reached out personally to both those superintendents in those districts, so I have what they are doing. Everyone was kind of in the same boat, is that now that we had that official word, we were all going back to our boards to have those conversations and decide, you know, get some direction as to what we might want to do. But the state is not going to come down with anything more because of the differences in the CBA. They were able to make those determinations on testing because it applies to everybody, but things that don't necessarily apply to anybody, they're leaving up to local decision making.
I would not want to have a meeting on this and resolve it any later than like the week of May 4th. Sometime between now and the end of that week, we ought to have this put together.
Well, and I guess I'm just, where did all this come down? I mean, I'm not sure what we have to do with respect to like the coaches. And I assume we need to pay the kindergarten teachers the full amount of their salary. So I guess I'm just curious, like the 2 other districts that had the kindergarten, full day kindergarten reimbursement issue, where did they come down?
One is not reimbursing at all, and the other one that I spoke to, which is a neighboring district, they are probably going to end up refunding the April payment and not charge the May payment, is where they're talking about.
So here's my suggestion. It seems like I can think of some questions myself. This does merit a discussion on its own.
Yep.
And I agree with Mr. Peterson that this needs to be timely because we also recognize that there's some financial hardships that are going on, and that as a district, you know, we need to do some financial planning, some very prudent financial planning. So is everyone okay with having a work session with the idea that Mr. Yanaglos and Mrs. Magyar already, she sounds like she did a lot of homework anyways, but this is where we have this discussion. Would that be okay?
Yeah.
I see Brittany, yes. I can't see Ellen, but okay. Okay. So is it possible that everybody could do this next Wednesday again? And with regards to Mr. Dozen asking for it to be a little later, could we do that next Wednesday?
So the
Fine with
20th.
me.
Good.
Yeah. Mark, is that okay with you, Mr. Dozen?
I think so. I'm going, I need to switch and let me just look at my calendar real quick.
Okay. When Mark's looking at his calendar, we'll circle back. I want to really thank the administrative team for putting together something that has been very difficult. Mrs. Magyar, you've been a wonderful leader, and I am very thankful for your leadership with the team. Feedback from our parents has been positive, and I hope that we can continue to make it to that finish line with that positivity, which I really feel after looking at our agenda and what Mr. Martin's put in place. It seems like expectations are clear and things are being communicated very effectively. So I'm looking forward to that. Mark, did you get to look at your calendar?
Yeah, next Wednesday should be fine. I would also say when we look at that in particular to all-day kindergarten, it would be helpful for the board to understand what are we doing for our kindergarten students today, and are we doing something different for half day versus those who are in full day while school is not face to face?
Yeah, we'll have all that information for you.
So
Okay.
Craig, if we do a work session on April 29th, does that give you enough time to get the information together that you need to?
Yeah, I think so. The thing we're struggling the most with has been pay to play, but we've made some pretty good progress with that stuff today. So we're getting a much clearer picture. So yeah, but I would think by next Wednesday we should have a much clearer picture of everything for sure.
So it sounds like we can tell people who make inquiries that we should know, we should have an answer to their questions like by the end of the month.
Yeah, I would think so.
So 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock.
5 o'clock, okay with everyone?
Yeah, 5's fine with me.
Yep.
Okay, let's do it at
Madam
5.
Chair, okay. Okay. All right, and if anything changes, Mr. Yanagos, please let me know. I mean, 24-hour notice will change the meeting, so, okay? Because we understand that's a difficult thing for you right now. Okay, we're gonna move on. Item 3, board member committee reports. We have financial liaison audit committee, anything? Okay, permanent improvement committee.
I can't recall, did we report on this at the April 8th meeting? Because we had a meeting on March 31st.
I don't think there was a formal report from PI committee. There was some discussion, but not a report, no.
Okay.
Do you want to report on that?
I have to confess, I am going to do so without my notes. I forgot to grab my notes before this, sorry, but we had a meeting on March 31st with Mark, myself, Joelle, Craig, Chris Code. I think that was it. And we approved some of the bids that Chris wanted to get at our April 8th meeting. That's why I was a little fuzzy on what we discussed. And I believe that we are starting on the high school stadium bleacher project next month. And we hope to they're also working on the auditorium lighting project, I believe this month or next month. We are starting on the security vestibule at the middle school. We didn't have a date, but that was really like next in priority. And I would assume Chris knows a little bit more at this point since it's been about 3 weeks since our meeting. And my apologies, I know there was more discussed, but those were the big takeaways.
Yeah, so the security vestibule, we had a target date of having it done in, by fall, by the opening of school. And again, this is all pre-COVID-19 things. We discussed it a little bit at our core meeting that we had last week about the timing. The thing that we're struggling right now, or I guess, one of the effects of this COVID-19 is that, as companies have been shutting down and not been able to work, there may be a break in a supply chain. So, what TDA is nervous about is getting the doors in. So while they're going to continue on their construction process with getting everything prepped and ready, the doors may not be in on time for the fall. And so, we gave the direction at the core team meeting just to keep working. I'm sure our community will be very understanding, even though we said we wanted it in by the start of school in the fall, for things out of our control and not being able to control the supply line. If it gets done after the start of school, it's still in process. It'll still be done. We just are, we're going to be at the mercy of all of the construction based on what they can get in. Being able to assemble crews together to continue to do the work on all of our projects. And so far, knock on wood, we've been very fortunate that our projects are still on time. But these doors, because they're coming in from overseas, may be impacted on a timeline standpoint. And we're just going to continue to work on them. And it may not be done by the start of school, but it will be done very short time afterwards.
Anything else from an improvement? We're going to move on to, go ahead, sorry.
I just add on from my recollection of our meeting. because of the tight timeline to try to get the security vestibule in place for the start of school in the fall, we were using the CMR model and using Shook to oversee the project, and that was to expedite it. So there will be a slight cost premium to use them to manage it, but it was what you get in return is speed and the ability to get the project done before the start of school. Assuming that the doors, that the way they describe it, it's like a whole security vestibule, like it comes in like as a module, like department stores, like stores use them. So it's the same concept that you'd see at a lot of stores. They use the same type of a module. But yeah, there may be delays, as Joelle mentioned, because of global disruption in supply chain.
Okay. We have board policy committee. Fred, I know that you attended that.
Well, we got the policies back in December, and we're going to be voting on them this afternoon. They're on the agenda. The changes, anyway.
Okay. And they're all recommendations that we got from Mr. Corbett. There's nothing
Correct.
lying.
Right.
Okay. We have sustainability committee. Mrs. Kramer, anything? I saw some emails about solar, is that correct? And then I saw that die down with Ms. Millen.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing to add. I mean, we haven't been able to do anything
Yeah.
because we haven't had any in-person school. So I guess the next thing to do would be figure out how, I mean, I guess we could try and figure out how to get a committee up and running without being in school, but I haven't, nobody's been pressing us to do that. And I don't know. Do you have any thoughts, Kathleen?
I mean, it might be a nice idea for us virtually to have a meeting. We have some of the things we had talked about for food services, and I had kind of asked that we kind of circle back with our food service and find out where we are with as far as like what we're serving. And usually that's the end of the year report. I wouldn't be, we could send out, we have a list of emails. We could send out a virtual invite and just, circle back with people, talk to Jen and see what her thoughts are about facilitating that again for us. And it seems like we could keep the discussion up and still move some of these things forward. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I need to go back and there were a lot of things that we needed to, some loose ends that were still out there that haven't really been resolved, partly because there's no way to do it right now. So let's work on it between now and the May meeting, and maybe we'll have something substantive to talk about that at that time.
Okay, sounds great. Okay, we're moving on, and we have item 4 district committee reports. We have transportation appeals committee. Yeah, okay. I'm going to skip over that one.
No transportation, period.
Yeah. Mr. Gilbride is not in attendance, I don't think. So we have CVCC report. We have safety and security meeting report. Ellen, Fred?
We haven't had a meeting since early February.
Right.
Okay. School foundations report, Brittany?
Just briefly, the Schools Foundation will be working with Dr. Martin to survey the teachers about delaying the application process for the grants for the subsequent school year, so that the results of that survey and whether or not the foundation is able to go live with grant applications in the fall will be forthcoming. Additionally, the Schools Foundation will be postponing the uphill downhill run that was tentatively pushed back to the fall. They will be canceling altogether for 2020.
Okay, Kappa, again, ready? Ms. Wigman, sorry.
I'm sorry. They Kappa continues to work on outreach with their students. They're continuing to push social media and are continuing to work through online engagement with some of their student groups. And as I tentatively understand, the wellness fair that was scheduled for this past month has been postponed to the fall, pending however we return in the fall.
Okay. PSO report. Fred, what's going on?
Despite building closures, our PSOs continue to support students, families, and schools in the district. Through virtual meetings, online book fairs, and other online support tools, they keep moving forward. Principals are participating in the PSO Zoom meetings with families and strengthening their connections. And Superintendent Magyar continues to work virtually with our leadership to strengthen our partnership and address the concerns of our membership. In an effort to immediately and directly support the most vulnerable in the district, our PSOs are partnering with the Broadview Heights Lions Club to provide $25 gift cards to families in the free and reduced lunch program on a weekly basis while school is closed. We are also exploring ways we can directly support the needs of the local food banks and Lend a Hand organization. These initiatives are PSO's highest priority in absorbing resources from all units. However, we should note that some of these resources were earmarked to support the middle school auditorium fund, which was projected to raise nearly $90,000 in its first year. The school closures have drastically cut that projected income, and future fundraising efforts are uncertain. And one more thing, as a multiple hat person, I offered to bring up at tomorrow's Kiwanis Zoom meeting the opportunity for Kiwanis to get in with the Broadview Heights Lions Club to help support needy families in the community.
Okay.
That's it.
Yeah, I know the Lions Club. I had a member reach out to me as well, and I forwarded something to Mrs. Magyar. I can re-forward that, but they were looking for a master list, and I think that's what it was. Do you remember that, Mrs. Magyar?
I do. So I put her in direct contact with the PSO, and that's how they've connected, because we can't really give out those names, but we've also pushed it out to the principals too, and said, if contact the Lions directly. I know there has been contact with them, and so they are helping our families that they know about.
Well, hopefully the Kiwanians and Brecksville will join them.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, other board member reports? Anyone? Okay, I see our senior parents are doing wonderful things. I can see via the social media platforms that I'm a part of, and it seems that they've started their own group and trying to do things to recognize the seniors. I know that we've done a wonderful job as well. We had our senior night, which I don't want to take away your announcements, Mrs. Magyar, but that was exciting.
But she will.
Okay.
I stopped. Cut it off. Come on. All right. Item 5, superintendent's announcements.
Just a few. A big shout out to our staff and our teachers that continue to charter waters that they've never chartered before and doing a great job. I get videos sent to me by some of the teachers, some of the parents send me cute things that the teachers are doing just to keep the kids engaged. I actually met with my student advisory group in a Zoom meeting a couple weeks ago, and it was really great just to see the kids and hear back and get feedback from them directly on how things are going. My heart broke when I saw a lot of their faces because they were so excited, but yet, they're bored. We talked about schoolwork, if it was too much, too little. So we got some feedback from them. And I sent that on to our principals as well, just to kind of give the student perspective, which, we need to be concerned about. A huge shout out to our robotics team who has started a website to make face shields for some of our first responders and our healthcare workers. Different organizations can go online and ask and order face shields. And we've got our staff, Craig Kowach and our Ryan, who are coming in to assist with that. We have parent permission, so kids are only there that are allowed to be there by parents. We are practicing social distancing. But they've made thousands of face shields for senior citizen centers, for Metro Health Hospital. They dropped off an order. And so they continue to give back to the community and use the equipment in our lab to make these shields for our healthcare workers. So I'm so proud of them. We had a senior ceremony on Friday evening for all of our seniors at the stadium. It was a drive-in rally, and so we had about 70 cars. It was great because parents drove their kids, so we loved seeing the parents too. and the kids got to drive on the track, and I think they thought that was like the coolest thing of the whole ceremony was that they got to drive on the track. And so we played the alma maters. Mr. Oss spoke, I spoke. We played some songs. We sung the alma mater. We played the senior songs. We had them honk our horns. It literally lasted 20 minutes, but definitely one of the most memorable things in my career. It was very nice to see everyone. We had some people who were sitting outside the stadium and got a lot of positive comments from that, you know, we did something different. We will give our department reports. I know Mrs. Mack, you asked about a food service update that will be part of the business service update that we will typically give in June. Hopefully it doesn't have to be virtual and we can do that in person, but certainly we will do them regardless in June and can update you on some of the food requirements. Not much has changed since the Obama. It's been laxed a little, but there's still requirements of a certain number of carbs, a certain grams of fat and things that we can serve on each meal and for each week. And I too would like to thank the Lions Club for your support. They jumped right on it, and we were able to give Giant Eagle gift cards to some of our needy families. So in addition to us providing meals for them, and a big shout out to Cindy and her staff. They've done a fantastic job of keeping our kids fed. I mean, just working their tails off to make sure that our kids are fed over break and, you know, during the week as well. But the Lions Club, they jumped right in and gave gift cards, and we were able to give those out. So, and I know they have continued support to be able to do that, so we can provide some additional groceries for our families. We do have plans for graduation. We're again thinking outside of the box. We actually asked the kids. We went to the seniors. We went to student council and said, "What do you want your graduation ceremony to look like? Since it can't look traditional in the way that we've all known it before, what do you want to do?" And so the kids were very adamant about keeping it as close to the date as possible. And what I mean by that is a lot of districts have gone and rescheduled events for July and have rescheduled events for August. And, you know, part of the fear of doing that is we've already rescheduled one, so we can push it out until July. Well, if we have another spike, we might not be able to do the July thing. So if we're going to do something and practice social distancing, let's keep the date, practice the social distancing, and let's do it. And so the kids really wanted to keep it either May 30th or June 13th was our backup date. I think we're shooting for June 13th. We are looking at to do a drive-in. So we're going to put a giant screen possibly on top of the roof at the middle school and do a drive-through ceremony where everyone could pull up in their cars with their families, and we'll have a ceremony on the screen coupled with a graduation parade of the kids. The kids came up with that. They were very excited about it. They thought that would be a really cool idea. And so, we're going to try to make that happen. I've also contacted both mayors who are also willing to live stream our ceremony on their TV stations or their YouTube and Facebook Live. So grandparents who might not be able to attend will actually still get to watch the ceremony. So we're very excited that our cities are going to do that for us, and more people will be able to enjoy our graduation ceremony for our seniors this year. And so right before this meeting, I was on another Zoom meeting with our PSO presidents, and there was a comment that was made, and I just want to clarify, and Craig, you can jump in on this because you didn't know about it, because I just was told this a couple minutes before this meeting. I think there's a perception out there that because we closed school in March, that there's going to be all these excess funds that are going to carry over till next year. And I just want to caution everyone on thinking that if you know anything about school finance, more than over 80% of our budget goes to salaries and benefits. Our staff has remained whole through this closure, so we've paid their benefits and their salaries. And so supplies, which yes is a cost that we're not enduring right now, and gas for our buses is a cost that we're not enduring right now, makes up such a small portion of our budget that there's not going to be this windfall of excess funds as people are thinking. Certainly there's not as much money being spent this year as there would be if school was in session, but we've also done things that we wouldn't have done if we were in session. The signs that you see and some of the extra things that we're trying to do to make sure that our seniors are taken care of, and some of these other things have cost money. And again, not saying that we aren't going to see some excess costs, but I don't want people to think that there's going to be like 4 months worth of excess costs that we're going to see because of the school closure. That's just not going to be the case. So I just want to put that out there and make sure that everyone is aware of how school finance works, and why we will see some, we're not going to see what people are envisioning. And that's it.
Thank you for clarifying that. Okay, moving on. Item 6, treasurer's announcements. We have A, bus purchase accounting 6. That looks awesome. B, turf fund accounting 6. Any comments on that, Mr. Yanagos?
I have lots of thoughts on it. Actually, so we'll start with the bus because that's first. So I had to, just because it's been very busy in the office, I had our audit firm take a look at the bus purchases. So this is really prior to my arrival. This is how many entries were associated with the buses, the bus debacle, except the ones that are highlighted here in yellow. So there was a final fix, and part of this goes back to I kind of suspected before that there was a transfer of funds, and it has affected the general fund. So we have to make one more adjustment in the system. So none of this will show until the April finances, but I kind of wanted just to update the board so that, you know, you're aware that we are still working on it. So we have the fix, and it is just going to get put into the system so that we can show that. The only thing I'm a little concerned about is it seems like to fix it, it's going to still the last fix is still going to hyperinflate revenues and expenditures, because I think the only way to, which I'm getting some final guidance on, but the only way to fix the transfer is to do another transfer. And when you do a transfer, there's always a receipt or a deposit, and there's always another expenditure. So we may not necessarily get rid of the problem. It'll be fixed the best way it can be for now, but it's really not going to clear off of our books until next year. But I'm glad that there's been some resolution. I'm glad the auditors agree, and that he was a part of that. So they did that all free of charge for us. So it's been great working with them to kind of get everything fixed. They said that is something they have never seen ever. So that'll be taken care of. The other thing, and there's a couple other fun things that I've been looking at in terms of funds that need fixed. And the turf fund was another one. And one of the first things I did when I got here was I reached out to them as well. And I said, you know, I don't think that the turf fund for the replacement of that eventually should be in a 4 fund. The 004 fund is really for building projects, and that's not considered that. When you would replace turf, that would be considered a permanent improvement project. So I reached out to them about fixing that and moving that fund from a 4 fund to a 3 fund. And so now that has already been done and already fixed. So now the only 4 funds that we have are the actual pre-K-5 building. And then I guess this should be C on the list, but we did receive the field house portion of the money for the building project from the city of Brecksville. What day was that? Friday? So yeah. Received it on Friday, and that has been deposited. So that all of that has been whole. There's going to be some accounting fixes that I need to do in regards to the field house, though, because the city gave us some money in August, I believe, and that was put into the 4 fund that we currently have. So I've moved all of that into the new 4 fund, so that's all tracked separately for the field house. And but I now have to transfer those expenditures, though, from what we incurred on our end. I got to move those expenditures over to the new one so that we kind of keep everything balanced between the projects. Once that's all cleaned up, moving forward, Shook is doing a great job with separating out the cost to the building and the cost to the field house. So now that we have the money and it's all been separated, we can kind of move forward very easily with making sure we're tracking those projects separately. And at the same time, the city will be earning the interest piece from their end as well. Also, just really quick, if anybody, since we are on the public session, we should have announced this earlier, I guess, to make sure, but if anyone in the public would like to make a public comment, please put your name and address in the comment box, and that'll come to me, and then we can call on you. So we'll give you a minute to do that if you do want to make a public statement for the meeting. Does anyone have any questions about the bus accounting or the turf fund or the building fund money?
Yeah, I had a couple of quick questions on the bus accounting fix. So you mentioned that it's going to take a year for it to kind of clear through the books. So does that mean like January 2021?
No. Just the new fiscal year, because if it has to go back, as if we have to do another transfer to fix it, which is what I think the system is telling me, because I thought I could do it one way, but the accounting system is not letting me do it. So if I have to do it as a transfer, which I think it's going to force me to do, it's going to continue through the rest of this fiscal year to hyperinflate revenues of the general fund and expenditures of the general fund. So the net cost will be zero, but in terms of moving stuff forward for next year, there's inflation in there. So, because right now that there's an additional special cost center from that's in there as the bus purchase allowance. So it's a 0019901 cost center. There's money in there. So to clear out, what they're asking to do is to move that money from there and put it into the regular general fund. And to do that, it's going to inflate the receipts or the deposits, revenues for the general fund, and then it's going to also have expenditures then associated with the 9901. But because they're both general funds, they roll up together in how a lot of the reporting is, because it's just a different special cost center. So I think the inflation, I'm not sure if we can get rid of. So I'm just waiting for clarification if that piece for the transfer, if we have to do a transfer, I don't think that we're going to be able to get rid of the inflation, but we'll make adjustments next year in terms of the budget, because we're not going to then spend that much money because it's a transfer.
So when we, in a little bit, we're going to get into your financial reports and so the FiveCast, where it's showing, we're, a plus 600,000 on the revenue side and higher about 100,000 on the expenditure for a net of 500 plus. I'm assuming that's net of this bus purchase fix, right? So those numbers from a general standpoint are accurate in terms of tracking where we're at financially. And I know we're going to get into this.
Well, yeah, and I have 2 meetings scheduled with Mike Sobel, because he also, like I said before, he's never seen it like this. Because what should have happened was, when that was being just moved from general fund to PI, no matter how many times you really would have done it, it should have just been a reduction of expenditure from one and an increased expenditure to another. So the part no one can figure out is why a transfer was used. Because once you involve a transfer, that's when you start involving revenues. Because, like I said, if you do an expenditure adjustment, you're just reducing revenues from one and adding revenues or expenditures to another. So it keeps it balanced. But when you put a transfer in, that's where you add the revenue on one side and an expenditure on the other fund. And that's where it got kind of like messed up. But no one also seems to have clarity of whether, because I think as I keep thinking process-wise through it, I think it's gonna keep increasing both. So it's gonna increase revenues and it's gonna increase expenditures, because it rolls it up into the general fund. So the expenditure is actually coming from that 0019001. That's where it's going to have to come from. And then, but because that rolls up as a general fund, it's still going to increase expenditures when these reports from FiveCast are showing up. So I'm meeting with Mike tomorrow, and then I'm also meeting with him on Monday to get more clarification once we push this through the system to make sure it's like recorded, and then we can explain it basically to everybody. But
and do you see that impacting the 5-year forecast, which I'm assuming you will be creating or updating next month?
Yes, that's part of the reason that I have a pretty long meeting with him scheduled on Monday to kind of push all that stuff through and get everything prepared, because that's what they're really gearing up for. But yes, it is going to affect that, because if it goes through transfers, it's going to hit both revenues and expenditures in the general fund, even though it's not making an impact, it's just inflating.
Okay, well, hopefully the end result on the 5-year forecast is a usable product, though, that we can gauge, accurately what revenues and expenditures are looking at. So whatever magic you have to do to get that to cancel out, so that we're looking at the most realistic numbers And also, I'm assuming, there's going to be some assumptions that are going to have to be made in this new world we're living in that will likely roll into the 5-year forecast somehow.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, we've been between Craig and I, all we do is meet with state superintendents and state treasurers to try to get some guidance. And, all we're doing is going back and asking for, some flexibility. And one of the areas that we're looking at for flexibility is the 5-year forecast, because how do you make assumptions on what just happened to the economy in the last 6 months and what the gradual, rebound will be to have those numbers. I mean, if you listen to the governor today, there's, a 20%, they're predicting, a 20 to 20% unemployment rate, which is double what it was in 2009 when we had the recession. At the highest point, it was at 10% at that point. So, school districts have been asking for some, flexibility in filing that 5-year forecast, because then what happens if you have all these districts that are now in fiscal emergency because of these assumptions and these predictions? There's also different regulations that go on if your district is designated as to one of those. And are you going to make districts go through all of those extra steps if it's just because of what has happened to our economy in the last few months? So there's a lot of unknowns and a lot of going back to our legislators and going back to people who, come up with the rules of how these things are regulated for us in schools and say, can we have some flexibility on that? We're asking for flexibility on licensure. We're asking for flexibility on testing again next year, because if you think about it, they got rid of report cards this year, but there's going to be no value added data next year because all the value added data is based on state testing. Well, if you don't have any, then what does evaluation look like again for teachers next year? And what does our report card and how does our funding that's tied to that performance, how does that look? And so there are so many unknowns right now. And I know that they were working on some guidance to come out about the 5-year forecast, maybe extending the time in which it needs to be filed only because so they can get a better handle on what some of these, impacts will be in terms of the economy and what our budget might be impacted by next year. We're hearing rumors that they're asking us to cut our budgets already for next year by 20%.
And just to put that in perspective, so our state funding, which is still low for Brecksville Broadview Heights, is a little over $5 million. So that's us cutting $1 million from the budget, just to put that in perspective.
Right. Well, and the other huge variable is, what is school going to look like in the fall? Is it going to be in person? Is it going to be remote? Is it going to be some hybrid? And is that hybrid model going to increase our costs? Yeah, there's more questions than answers right now.
100%. Sounds like you should be on a committee with me, Mark, and help me figure it out.
Hey, yeah, well,
Nominate Mark.
everybody's in a waiting game. This is unprecedented, and nobody knows what the future is going to hold. Are they going to open things back up and have another spike in infections and close it all back down, or are they, is somebody going to come up with some ingenious, solution or a remedy for the virus? Who knows? I mean, we just got to take it one day at a time and make the best decisions we can with what's in front of us.
Yeah, and that's kind of how we, I've been trying very diligently to get information out to our community as quickly as I find out about it. So, the minute the governor comes down with something about school, we try to have something, queued up that afternoon. And, the last email that I sent on Monday, that's why we're going to spend, probably most of our summer looking at 3 scenarios and having 3 plans, A, B, and C. Does school open in the fall and it looks like it does right now? Does school open in the fall and it's a hybrid model? And does school open as as we traditionally know it with social distancing? And so we have to plan for all 3, because as all of the guidance has changed from March 8th to April 22nd, as quickly as it has, we know it's going to change that quickly over the summer. So we have to be prepared for whatever is going to be thrown at us. And each one of those scenarios impacts staffing differently, impacts transportation differently, impacts food service differently, impacts instruction differently, and it impacts everything. So, we're coming up with those 3 plans, very detailed. We're going to involve staff and parents and in those conversations about what that's going to look like. And at the end of the day, I've had parents reach out and they say, we like this model. And I'm like, that's great. We like this too. However, the decision is not going to be ours, but we just need to be prepared for whatever that decision is. And that's what we're going to do our best on, making sure that we have 3 very comprehensive plans of what fall could look like.
Yeah, and just to and maybe remind everybody, that those that newer board members, when we ran through the Great Recession in 2008, 2009, because so much of our funding comes from local property taxes, one of the biggest hits was when, after the recession, we had lower collection rates. So we're normally collecting 99.5% or above, which means, we're blessed that so many people, homeowners, pay their taxes and pay them on time. But after the Great Recession, it declined. We were in the 97 point something percent, and that's huge dollars, and that really affected us. And then once the economy recovered and those numbers ticked back up, we were able to use that as a, to strengthen our financial balance sheet. So meaning that if we do see this economic recession, depression, whatever it turns out to be, and it runs deep, we may not see some of the implications of it from a revenue standpoint for a year or 2 out, when collections start tipping down.
Mhm. Yep.
That'll make it's going to make it difficult, especially with staffing. I mean, because of when we have to notify people of staffing changes. I mean, we're not going to be free of that obligation, are we? We can't be held harmless. We're still going to have that obligation. So, okay.
We're working through that.
Yeah. Item 7, community communications, hearing public. Mr. Yanaglos, do we have anyone?
We do. Bonnie Monteleone would like the opportunity to speak. So I'm going to unmute her.
Well, let me read my spiel real fast, if you don't mind. Okay, hearing of the public, persons wishing to address the Board of Education may do so at this point. No formal action will be taken on subjects that are not included on this agenda until the board has had an opportunity to study them. Comments regarding personnel must be submitted in writing through the office of the superintendent. In order for the board to complete the planned agenda in an effective and efficient manner and to provide sufficient opportunities for members of the public to be heard, hearing of the public shall be limited to a maximum of 30 minutes, during which each speaker shall be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes. So you have the name and address, and go ahead.
This is Bonnie Monteleone speaking on behalf of the Brecksville Broadview Heights Education Association. First and foremost, I just want to update the board that my colleagues, they have embraced this new opportunity and they're trying things that they've never done before. As many of you know, our teachers are trying to connect with students using technologies. Some of the technologies function well when you have 4 kids jumping around you and you have limited Wi-Fi, and some don't. As many of you know, our teachers are making efforts to have face-to-face contact with students via technology. They are posting in whatever way is possible. Elementary has a different setup than middle school and high school, but we're reaching out to our stakeholders. We're working with our students, we're working with the parents, and I think we're hitting the mark, since some say it's too little and some say it's too much. And we just keep saying we're flexible and we will work with you. We have elementary teachers that are taping themselves reading to their students and posting those so that the kids can hear their teacher and see their teacher and engage. We have teachers that are starting their day Zooming with their elementary class to give the kids a chance to see them, to see each other. We have others that are connecting via Google Classroom assignments, prepping kids for the upcoming AP exams. We're doing whatever we can to try to move the kids towards meaningful goals that will prepare them for the expectations to come. Fourth quarter is never going to look like a fourth quarter did in the past. We cannot replicate the value of face-to-face contact and therapies delivered in person within the school. But what we can do is the best we can in the situation, and guided with our hearts and our professionalism, we can serve our district. And right now, that is the path that we are on. I have a teacher who yesterday said that one of our colleagues participated in an IEP meeting in a hospital room because she hadn't given birth yet. I have to verify that one. But I know I have staff that are participating in Zoom meetings and stepping up to be wherever they are needed and doing it to the best of their ability. Going forward, I have to plead that you will keep in mind the fragile health needs of our students and our staff. And I say this because I participated in a call as part of a consortium of teachers. And one of the other presidents from a different county shared the heartbreak of losing a teacher to COVID and how the students in that group were going to feel. And I really am looking forward to when I can be face-to-face and in the same room with my students, but I think we are going to have to carefully consider what steps have to be taken so that our students are able to engage without passing communicable. Our staff are able to safely engage. And we are recognizing just how big stakes this can be, the high stakes of what's going on. I want to share that we are looking forward to collaborating with whatever plan is developed for next year. It's really important that we all understand how we arrive at a decision and that we all feel connected with how it will play out. Right now, I will be honest, I have teachers that reach out with lots of questions. And I am, like many of you, saying, I don't have an answer to that yet. But each communication is valuable and each person's opinion should be heard. And I just look forward to having those opportunities to be in a room or at least a Zoom meeting and be able to listen to where we're going and to feel that we are all together with a common destination. I know as a parent of a senior that this year will be one that will be challenging for many. And I know that right now, one of the things that most of my colleagues, if not all of us, are regularly asking ourselves, what is the mental health of the students who are at home? We have students who are engaging with us regularly and others that we're struggling to get contact with. I need for you to understand as a Board of Ed that everything we're doing for kids, we also are doing with a heart and we are doing with compassion. And we are trying to utilize and learn from the past, working towards a new future. So again, on behalf of the teachers, I just wanted to update the board. I want to thank you for all that you're doing to help us at this time and to let you know that we are working really, really hard trying to be as much as we can be. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Monteleone. It's easy, I speak from where you're coming from. It's easy for people outside of teaching to offer the way things should be done. I find it interesting that our profession, teaching, is always open to better suggestions. I don't feel like I would tell my doctor how to do business, nor would I tell my accountant, but I always find it interesting that people always want to give input on how we should be doing things. I think, you know, overall, I feel like it's as good as it's going to get, and we're doing a great job. And I ask people in the community to think about how they would feel if they were getting input in their specialty and being told how to do their job. Nobody should be doing that. Nobody knows this profession. We hired these teachers because they are professionals. So I just am asking the community to recognize the fact that these are professional people. They know what they're doing, and they're doing it the best job that they can. Anyone else, Mr. Yanagos? No?
No, there are none.
We're going to move on to item 8, board business. We have A, Neola policy first reading. B, resolution of your mouse is there. Resolution of conduct to conduct virtual board meetings. C, resolution authorizing blanket purchase orders. D, approval of other board business consent agenda. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Any comments? This is the policy Mr. Peterson spoke of. The item B is for us to conduct our meetings in the fashion that we're currently conducting them. C, this is resolution authorizing blanket purchase orders, which was recommended by our treasurer to change, which came through the auditor. Is that correct, Mr. Yanagos? And D, approval of other board business consent agenda. Okay.
The resolution is, I was just going to add a couple comments if you don't mind, Mrs. Mack.
No.
Oh, okay. So the resolution to conduct virtual board meetings is just a recommendation by our attorney so that if anyone forgets what we're dealing with now, 10 years down the road, that there's a document that says that, you know, because of this is the reason we held our meeting in the way that we are holding it and not in person. Although the meeting is still public, it was open to the public, it was announced in all of the correct protocols, but it's just something that allows you and gives you some cover in case somebody wants to say, this wasn't a legit meeting. This will give us cover to do that. Your Neola policies, there's a bunch there. Again, these are changes or revisions to either law that then dictated a change in our policy. They've all been vetted through our policy committee. And you have a first read, although you have the opportunity, should you choose, to waive that second reading and vote on them tonight. It would just be a motion by one of you to do so.
Okay.
The only thing I have on the that I wanted to mention is in the resolution, the first line, it says me instead of met.
We'll add a T.
Thank you.
Is that the virtual board meeting one?
Yes.
Just don't buy a vowel, Fred.
Yes, sir.
Okay, roll call.
Can't afford it.
Mr. Dosen,
Yes.
Mrs. Kramer,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mrs. Wigman,
Yes.
Mrs. Mack.
Yes. Item 9, superintendent's personnel recommendations. We have A, certified recommendations, B, classified recommendations, C, supplemental recommendations, D, approval of superintendent's consent agenda. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We kept the agenda just because this is a template for all of our agendas. There are no supplemental recommendations. I did not want you to think that that we are missing a form. We just didn't have any for this particular month, but we just kept the title on there because of this is a template for all of our meetings. But any questions on any of the certified or classified recommendations?
No.
Okay, I will have a comment after your vote.
Okay. Roll call.
Mr. Dosen,
Yes.
Mrs. Kramer,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mrs. Wigman,
Yes.
Mrs. Mack.
Yes.
I would just like to wish John Schinker the best of luck. He has accepted another position in another district, and he's been with us for 20 years and has been a great asset to us. And I just want to thank him for all he's done for us.
Sad to see him go. Thank you. Item 10, superintendent's other business. We have A, Kent State College Credit plus MOU, B, University of Akron College Credit plus MOU, C, Cahaga Community College College Credit plus MOU, D, College Now MOU. Item E, TPE donation resolution, F, substitute bus driver retention stipend, G, approval of BDHCSD off-site teaching and learning plan, H, approval of superintendent's other business. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Comments?
Items A through C are typical yearly MOUs that we have to have in place for any of our students who are going to take College Credit Plus classes at any of those universities. So these are yearly things that you approve. We get them starting in January. We hold them to the spring and then send them out accordingly. College Now, the MOU, we started with them last year, and they provide some extra service to our high school staff in terms of helping families with FAFSA forms, doing parent information nights on colleges, helping some of our kids locate scholarships that might be appropriate to them. So that is a service we started, like I said, last year, and the high school administration would like to continue with that service this year. We've had great feedback from our parents on that too. Our PPE donation resolution is so that we can donate our hand sanitizers, any masks or gloves that we have to our first responders. We have to have a resolution that allows us to give those donations to those people. We made that donation already. It was concerning to me that we got that most of those things into the hands of our first responders as quickly as we can. Please know that most of that donation was really from parents, and it wasn't our taxpayer dollars that made that donation. As we collected all of the hand sanitizers and the antibacterial wipes that were out of the classrooms that parents had supplied as part of the supply list. So I just want to make that clear on that. The substitute bus driver retention stipend, if you recall in the fall, we had talked about, a way that we can incentivize getting bus drivers. You know that there's a shortage throughout the state, and we agreed to hire these bus drivers on as a substitute. And after a 6-month period, they would get a stipend, and so long as they agreed to stay with us 6 months after, when they would then become members of the union. And so that is what those stipends are for. And the offsite teaching and learning plan, as you know, that's what we've been doing for the last month. We have a plan, we have a grading system, and that plan is posted on our website as it has been. It's been rolled out to staff, when we started this online plan, and as a formality, we would like it to be approved by the board.
Any questions?
Well, just one question, that the offsite teaching and learning plan, was that just added to the agenda? Because I was looking earlier today and yesterday, and I didn't see that.
You're right. I had a conversation with Kathleen earlier this afternoon, and she had asked that it would be added onto the agenda.
My only concern is I haven't had a chance to kind of look through it. Has everybody on the board looked through this? I really, I had looked before at the agenda, and it wasn't on the agenda, so I know it was a late ad, but I didn't really look through it. I'm feeling
I took a quick look-see through it.
If we're meeting next week to talk about the pay to participate and reimbursement and those things, is it, could we have I guess I'd kind of like a little bit of a walk, first of all, a chance to review it a little better, review it, period. And then maybe a little bit of a walkthrough on it, because I guess I don't know how everybody else feels. I'm feeling like I'm flying a little blind here.
Yeah, Mark, I'm the same way. I didn't have a chance to take a look at it either.
Well, this is something that I asked Mrs. Magyar. We already had this, is that correct, Mrs. Magyar, on?
Yes, it's been on our website since the start. It's probably 2 weeks into the time that we were in the shutdown, and it's been posted on our website under our offsite learning plan tab, and it was sent out in a link in a district email the same day it was posted. So it's been out there. People have been able to see it. It has been gone over at different staff meetings with principals and so forth.
Okay.
In our union, was this a collaborative plan that came up with, or Mr. Martin came up with this?
Our administrative team came up with it on a format that had been shared out by several districts throughout Northeast Ohio, and kind of followed that same format of what that looks like. One of the things that and we've received some criticism that we didn't have a plan ahead of time, and it's important for our community to understand that prior to all of this, districts had the choice as to whether or not, in terms of dealing with calamity days, to do a blizzard bag or to do some online learning. And in this district, up until this point, it was always determined that calamity days would be made up. And so therefore there was never a need to have an offsite, distance learning plan. So while we used models that we got from other districts that were, had that plan because that was their way of dealing with calamity days, so they really had some experience implementing that plan, we took, guidance from, several districts similar to ours to tailor our plans around what those plans would be, and not, asking our teachers or to have our plan look much different than what other schools are doing throughout the Northeast Ohio.
I mean, I'm sorry. I mean, that's all fine. I guess we're meeting literally next Wednesday. We just talked about having another meeting next Wednesday. I mean, my preference would be to just to pull this out and put it on next Wednesday's agenda, and that way it just would give whoever would like. I know Ellen mentioned she didn't get a chance to look at it yet either. Chance to kind of look through it, and it. I also would think it would be helpful to just even spend 5 minutes having Joelle, you or somebody, Mr. Martin or somebody kind of walk us through it, just so that before we approve it, we're actually doing a little bit more due diligence on looking at it, if you will.
Totally fine with me.
I think that's a great idea. Okay, so let's pull
Good.
item G, if that's okay with everyone.
Yep.
Can I have a motion to amend the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
With the removal of item G. Sorry,
Yep.
let's do that again. Let me say that correctly. Can I have a motion to remove item G from the agenda?
Sure. So moved.
Second, who seconded it?
Second.
Okay. So item G will be removed. And so we will only be taking roll call on everything else. Item G removed. Is that okay, Mr. Yanagos? Did I do that okay?
I think technically you have to vote on the amendment before you can vote on you have to vote to remove it.
Okay.
Meaning we have to vote to approve the changing of the agenda, and then we can go back and vote on the agenda item.
Yes.
So we have a motion already to remove it. Can
And
yeah, so you need to do roll call?
Yes. Mr. Dosen,
Yes.
Mrs. Kramer,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mrs. Wigman,
Yes.
Mrs. Mack.
Yes.
Okay. So this will be
Right,
items
so-
A through F.
Okay. May I have a motion to approve those agenda items?
Well, this one already has
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Mr. Dosen did the first and Mr. Peterson did a second.
Yep.
Sorry. Roll call?
Mr. Dosen,
Yes.
Mrs. Kramer,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mrs. Wigman,
Yes.
Mrs. Mack.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. Okay, item 11, treasurer's consent agenda. We have A, financial report, March 2020, B, minutes of April 8th, 2020 meeting. C, we have FY 2020 gap conversion contract. D, donations. E, approval of treasurer's consent agenda. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Gianna, let's take it away.
Okay, so first I'll go over quickly, like we just kind of went through this last month, so you can look at the bank rec real quick. I actually realized before the meeting that I accidentally had posted the February one. So I did, correct this. It still balances to zero. Again, on the left-hand side, those were our depository balances of where the funds are. Really quick about the Star Ohio account. So that account was supposed to be used, from what I understand, to pay off when they did the bond refunding. So that money is probably going to drastically reduce because that's going to be moved into operating money. So that's something we're going to try to finalize here over the next couple of weeks. But I was not sure that that was supposed to be the case.
Could you make that enlarged?
Yes,
Thank
I can.
you.
Um, So that Star Ohio account, you will probably notice we just don't know where that money is going yet. I'm talking with Red Tree to see whether or not some of it, or if it's going to be split, where some of it will go into investments and other parts of it may go into the citizens accounts. But this basically shows where all of the deposits are located. You can see the interest earned, which was, we'll see how April is. I think some of this may be some delay, but it looks like, for the month of March, we actually still did pretty well in terms of interest for the building and all of that. So we're at $175,000 for the month. There are some fees that are associated with the management of those investment accounts, which is $1,600. And then there were some capital gains as well for $19,000 throughout the month. So down here under the adjustments to the bank balance, we do have outstanding checks at the time when we close the month for $381,000. And then we still have those petty cash funds. If you remember from last month, there was a 10-cent bank correction that was handled at the bank level because it was a mistake on their part, which then you can see that the FinSum, which is our balance in our book, does balance to what the bank balance is at the end of the month. So that is for your review. If you have any other questions, do you have any questions on that report?
No.
Okay. So if we look at the forecast 5, we look at revenues. This is the fiscal year 2020 revenue and expenditure analysis through March. So we first talk about, so overall, this is like our overall picture in the green. You can see the current year-to-date revenue collections. It does say it's $630,000 and a favorable to the forecast. Expenditures are unfavorable, and so that net is right now sitting at $525,000, still favorable impact on the cash balance. And again, once we figure out more of the unknowns and see what the month of April kind of looks like, we'll continue to get a clearer picture as we get closer to the fiscal year end. We do have the variance in cash balance comparison. So by the comparison of cash balance is $2.6 million more than it was last March. Most of this is attributed to the property taxes and local property taxes of where the revenue piece of this is. So at the bottom in number 3, you can see the June cash balance is projected at this point to be $19,602,000, which is $2.1 million surplus for this fiscal year. The forecast that was done in October was a $1.6 million, I believe, surplus for this year. So we're doing a little bit better, which is indicative of taking that number from October, adding the $525,000, which puts us at $2.1 million in surplus. So when you add that surplus to the fiscal year 2019 cash balance in June of last year, that gives you the $19,602. This is just for the month of March. So we're specifically looking at March of 19 to March of 20. And I always usually draw my attention down to the box, basically. I don't necessarily like the bar graph that they use, but because this kind of tells you where that the biggest piece of where we are, $85,000 more this year. So $97,700 is to the positive of actual collections for the month of March this year versus what we had last year. So that's the bulk of it. We're actually under by about $1,300 in state revenue and then $10,000 in just other revenue. So it's a positive for us for the month of March of $85,000 from last March. So we're just comparing 1 month of last year to 1 month of this year, same month. Moving on down here into number 2, the actual received through March compared to the prior year. So now we're really looking at July through March, and we're from 19 and then also for the current year. And when we look at the overall piece, like I said earlier, the local tax revenue is the 2449. So the majority of the extra money, or that we're saying, is actually coming in local taxes. State revenue overall is down a little bit. And then we have what's just lumped into everything else, which is $592,000 to the positive. Now, one of the other things I will alert you to is that if you've followed some of the news that with how this has been affecting workman's comp and things like that, they have issued a 100% refund, and that is supposed to be coming, I think, within the next week or two. So I don't know if that'll actually hit April or if it'll hit May. It depends on when we receive the check. So that will be a sort of unexpected increase since they released those funds that will be coming in. I believe our projection will be somewhere around $200,000. It's supposed to be 100% of the premium that was paid in 2018. So that would be something that would be classified in other revenue. So that's where some of that stuff comes from. Compared to the same period last year, when we lump all of it together, it's $2.9 million more. So number 3, we look at July to March again. So this is where the current fiscal year, current year-to-date revenue collections indicate $630,000. It's favorable compared to the forecast. So when we look over to that little chart on the right, this is what was forecasted in this column. Those were the forecast estimates. And then this is where it's kind of calculated of what they assume it's going to end up being at the end of the year. So we're going to still be positive by 630,488 against the forecast that was done back in October.
And that, Craig, that all other revenue, you know, which is where where it really moved the lever, you know, can you speak to where did that come from? Like, what is the all other revenue that we ended up, you know, 666 is a little bit ominous, but you know, what's the bulk of that number?
I believe that the bulk of that number is, so when at one point, one of the buses went into an 1890 code, receipt code, and an 1890 is considered other. So that is where that should be. And again, I'm still working with Mike to get some more clarification to make sure that that's why that number is so large. The other thing that can happen when it comes to other revenue is, and there has been some changeover, you know, here with treasurers. And so when you have, some treasurers will book certain things as a refund of a prior year expenditure. For instance, like a refund for like a workman's comp, for instance. We normally get we get a refund back from workman's comp. So some treasurers will put that in an 1890. Other treasurers will book it as a 5300 because it's really a refund from a prior year. I typically book it as a 5300. That could be also considered another revenue. I'm not sure what their parameters are yet too with Forecast 5 because I'm still new to using their software. But I think that would also be lumped in there anyways. But some stuff could be actually coding, some stuff could not be. I have.
Do we think? Sorry. So do we think this is real, or is this a bookkeeping virtual number that will disappear and not be as favorable as it looks right now?
I don't necessarily think it will be as favorable. That's what my gut is telling me that that's going to be at the end, because I think that the bus part is in there. So I think that will be reduced. Hopefully once we clear it up, or what's going to happen, like I said earlier, is if it's going through as a transfer, the receipts are going to go up. So we're going to see another $400,000 dumped in, but we're also going to see then the expenditure side increase as well in an equal amount. So the net effect should still be, the net effect should still be the same.
Okay.
So you can see in this bar graph here, the comparison of the 5-year forecast revenue with actual plus the estimated monthly cash flow. You see the forecast was 53 million, basically flat, 53 million, and then July to March, plus they're estimating through June, for April through June is 53,645. So it just kind of does a little bit of subtraction of what they're saying, favorable versus unfavorable. When we look at the expenditure side, so March, again, we go back to just the monthly. We're comparing March to the prior year. So March of 19 compared to March of 20. And we actually see a pretty large reduction, $858,000, $859,000 really, less than what we did last year. So if you look, you see salaries and benefits are here. It shows that we're down $900,000 for the month. And if I recall, because I think we're on the same pay schedule as I was in my prior district, last March was a 3-pay month. So that is the difference for the month of March as to why it is off. For that is because March last year was a 3-pay month, and this year it was a 2-pay month. Purchase services are elevated slightly at $85,000. All other expenses would be a savings of $16,000. So that's what kind of brings down your total of less from last year. But again, most of that is all related to salaries and benefits for the 3-pay versus a 2-pay month. When we look at number 2, actual expenses incurred through March compared to the prior year. So again, we're looking from July 1st through March. We have the prior year expenditures up above, and we have the actual expenditures occurred for July of this year below. We are tracking $2.1 million above where we were last year. The categories that are affected the most are 1.19 million, which is all in salaries and benefits. So I'm assuming that was from possibly people movement on the salary schedules, columns, steps, all of those things calculated together, plus increases in health insurance costs, puts us at 1.19 more this year than what we had last year at this time. Purchase services is a total of 639,000. And, you know, again, this is attributed to, and some of the stuff actually, this is special ed tuition, and these are costs that we can't necessarily control. Some of this is just, it is what it is when it comes to special education. We have special education transportation that is trending high right now. So those are, again, things that you necessarily can't control because they're just what we have to do. So those purchase services are elevated mostly because of that. We also do have some elevated, I put together some legal fees. I'll share with you guys next month because I want to just double check everything. I did them yesterday. Not horribly elevated, but we are elevated this year for legal, but some of that is related to the building fund or the building project. So I kind of did a breakdown and went back and did some research for legal fees back to fiscal year 2015 moving forward. And so I'll share that with you guys for next month. But we are elevated this year. I think they're projecting off a forecast. That line item alone at this point is, I want to say, almost $30,000 more than what was projected back in October. And then all other expenditures, this is just a lumping of basically everything else where we're trending higher. So I do believe that some of that stuff will drop because now they're going to start trending out as we move down here to the what's going to happen from here on out with assumptions. But I do believe we will have some savings in terms of supplies and some of that stuff. However, we do have some increases in supplies because we did have to purchase a lot of cleaning supplies and cleaning devices, which we are going to be applying for some grants for as well to try to defer some of those costs. Number 3, the possible cash flow variance is due to fiscal year to date actual results is $105,000 above when we look at the whole thing. So we're at $297,000 below the forecast. So we're just comparing this to the forecast alone of what was done in October. So we're looking at trending just a little bit below that line at almost $300,000. Again, purchase services are $430,000 above. And I'm going to again talk with Mike tomorrow because he's the one that did the forecast in October to figure out why we're that far off. I mean, for a district this size, that's still a decent number to look at. You know, $50,000 is not a lot for a district this size with the budget, but $400,000 is starting to get to, you know, what is known now that wasn't known back then. And it could have just been bad data. I don't know what information he was given when he did that forecast. So we'll probably see some decent changes because we'll clean all of this up for the May forecast so that we can be as accurate as possible. Overall, though, when you look at the 105,000, that's the number I'm more concerned with. So we're off in a line item of 430,000, but we're saving 300,000 here. So that's really kind of why you're overall only at $105,000 that's off from the forecast. And then there's the bottom piece, which kind of shows where you are in terms of the total expenditures and what's estimated. But again, I think some of our costs in the end will decrease down. We projected that in terms of substitutes, we may actually save almost $100,000 there. But again, it depends on where we go with that discussion next week to see if there would be any other ways that we can save there or whether we don't. Some of those could be increased costs for us as well that will balance out some of this depending on the decisions that are made, especially regarding around like pay to participate, for instance. So that kind of defers. But the preliminary numbers I have right now is without pay to play participation fees, it's about $100,000 for the spring portion of it. So supplementals are a little over $120,000. We obviously won't have the transportation costs. So we've got to look at some of that stuff hopefully by next Wednesday to get a better picture. But hopefully we can kind of keep these expenditures actually down and maybe make up a little bit of ground because some of our expenditures may down the road be higher than anticipated. So we'll have to see what the model is like this fall.
So, so a couple of questions just to kind of confirm. You mentioned that we're likely to see a rebate from workers' comp, and that might be in the $200,000 range. So that, and when do we know that? Is that a May or a June, or we're?
Should be by the latest in May. I think the last email I saw said that the checks were being written this week.
Okay. And the savings on substitute teachers where we don't need as many, so is that an annual? So at the end of the year, we're talking like maybe another 100,000 we might save from the less need for substitute teachers?
Correct.
Okay. And what about, and I don't know, Joelle, maybe you need to weigh in on this, but the special ed teachers, so we have aides. I know when we're in school where, you know, some students have an aide all day long, you know, some aides are for a group of students. What does that look like online? Are aides still in use or are they not?
Yeah, so we do have some of our aides in use. As a matter of fact, I know Gina conducted an evaluation or an observation on one of our teachers and was in her Zoom classroom, and the aide was actually in the Zoom classroom with the kids. So definitely they're being used when they can and as part of that virtual learning for sure.
Okay.
And then
So-
oh, go ahead, Mark. I have a couple questions when you're done.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna, you know, reiterate that, you know, as we look at this you know, compared to the forecast, at least right now, we're trending, you know, $525,000 to the good. We're not quite sure if that's all real because of that bus. It's like we have a hangover from that buying 5 extra buses is just, but whatever, you know, eventually that's all going to shake out. Although it is encouraging that, you know, we should see some good movement with workers' comp and with the substitutes that will help create a little more of a cushion, you know, in our financial picture before the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Helen.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just have a couple, I think, quick questions. Craig, you had mentioned legal fees, and then you referred to legal fees associated with the new building. What funds are the legal fees for the new building paid out of? My understanding that was all part of the bond passage, but am I wrong about that?
I believe, so I can do some research into that, but I believe all of the legal fees are coming out of the general fund. I'm not sure that, so my prior experience is more with the OFCC side. So you're not permitted to charge legal fees out of a building fund. I don't know if it's different though, because we're doing the whole thing 100% locally. So I can look into that, but right now it is being charged out of the general fund.
So, and just to remind the board, you know, we had a fee for Mr. Riley, and that was a flat fee for the building project. But please remember that we also asked him then to do some of these extra agreements that we have with the city of Brecksville. We asked him as part of that TIF. So there are some additional fees that he's been charging, not as a flat fee, not as part of that original flat fee that we were charged for the building project. So all of those things are additional legal fees. I will just be honest, and, you know, some at the advice of you and some just for my own sanity. I mean, with all of this that has been going on with COVID-19 and all of these regulations and guidance and changing and, you know, things we have to look at with, you know, evaluation and social distancing and how do we bring people back and, you know, resolutions as you approved tonight with, you know, having to have meetings like this. There's been a lot of interaction with attorneys lately just to make sure that we are staying within the confines of the law, within the confines of our collective bargaining agreements, and a lot of consultation with our attorneys just to make sure that we're going about this in the most legal, correct manner that we possibly can go into. So, that number is going to look higher this year just because of the uniqueness of our situation and not wanting to make decisions, you know, on the fly and in isolation without, you know, checking what the legal implications could be. More so down the line. So, you know, while you make decisions today, sometimes you don't see the impact of that till 2 years later. So to minimize that, we have been engaging with our attorneys more so than I want to be honest with you. I mean, I adore them all, but I don't need to talk to them on a regular basis. But I feel like every time you turn around, it's, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Oh my gosh. So we will own that our legal fees are going up because we're talking to them a little bit more right now due to our current situation.
Yeah, and the other piece though too, just, and I'm more new, I mean, I had some of these at Brookfield, but there are we actually do a pretty substantial business in terms of property taxes. It's a substantial amount of people that in Brecksville and Broadview Heights that are filing appeals to reduce the value of the property. Like I said, at Brookfield, I think I had one in the 3 years I was there. There are probably 15 or 20 properties that have been filed. And some of them are, you really do need legal counsel because some of them are saying they want to reduce the property value from $3 million to $1.5 million. So if that's allowed to go through and you don't have legal representation, you could easily just be, boom, half the valuation, which means the district is going to lose that money as well. So it was kind of eye-opening for me, but that is a pretty decent, hefty amount. And I don't know if it's more now than what it was. I kind of have to still meet with them. They've been doing that work for the district for quite a while.
Thanks. And then my other question was just, Craig, you had referenced the purchase services and a lot of it is for special ed. I mean, presumably, if we're keeping more special ed students in the district, we can hope that number will go down. Is that a correct assumption on my part?
If we're educating them in the district?
Correct.
Yeah, I haven't had I mean, I have to still meet with Gina to kind of go through them. And we said we were going to meet, but everyone is so busy these days. It's kind of crazy. We need to meet about that stuff. I do know that like the transport, I just talked to even Chris Code the other day about looking at special ed transportation, and we'll have to involve Heidi in their department as well. But we are trending, again, way higher than the forecast. But again, I guess my question with Mike tomorrow is kind of like, where did some of that information come from? I don't know what pieces he had being more of an outsider, not the person kind of sitting in the chair knowing the district over time. To do that, to know whether it's just, and I'm not blaming Mike obviously either, because it's a hard role to sit in. But what we're seeing is it's the variance, just the total amount, which according to the forecast is a huge amount. So I don't know, it may not really be not typical.
Okay. And we've also purchased some additional things that were not, that we didn't talk about last year. We had, a couple of our audits done that were a significant cost, which would come out of purchase services as well. So
$75,000.
It's not totally a special ed issue. We had a consult that we hired for phone service. So a lot of those things come out of there, things that we're doing, just to keep, our systems upgraded and so forth. But it's such a variable with special ed too, Ellen, because while it seems high that we're sending kids out to educate them at different facilities and we're paying that tuition, the flip side is, for any of those parents who want to challenge it to go through a due process hearing, one child may cost us the variance that you're seeing right now to process through a due process hearing. So sometimes, it is, while it seems like it's a lot of money, it's actually more cost effective to, do some type of settlement agreement where a child may go to a different location to be educated, to avoid going through a due process that could not only drag on for years, but also cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars for one student. So it's that constant weighing when those situations come up, and you never know when those situations are going to come up.
Okay.
Right. And a lot of the kids too, just to, the one thing I do remember, a little reminder from Gina, is a lot of the kids are scholarship students. So we're having more scholarship students, and we have zero control over that. So just to kind of put that out there.
So two other real quick things. So on that special ed front, especially students who are being serviced outside of the district, are we looking at, are those students still getting serviced during this COVID-19 situation? And would there be any potential adjustment on some of those fees that we're paying the outside organizations if the student isn't being serviced to the same level?
Well, that's a touchy subject for a couple of reasons. Number one, many of those kids, as Craig mentioned, are your John Peterson scholarship kids. So we have no control over that. That money comes out first and foremost. It's not like it's taking payments out or anything like that. In terms of services, yes, they should be providing those services. We certainly can check in, but just as, we've had very little federal guidance on, because your IEPs are federal protected, guidance on what that looks like. And you know, really what the guidance that's come out from ODE for all special ed kids, regardless if they're in your facility or you're responsible for them in another facility, is, you know, to provide the services that you can. And then when this dilemma was over, we would look at maybe looking at extended school year services and looking at compensatory education over the summer. Well, now we're waiting for guidance. Since, you know, we didn't get that chance to come back to kind of make up some of that service time with these kids. Now, what is the new guidance that's going to come out with? How do we deal with ESY services? How do we deal with all of those extra service minutes that, you know, many of us are out of compliance with now by no fault of our own? Our special ed teachers are doing a fantastic job providing the services they can to our kids. They can in the way that they can, but there's certain specific services like SLP services. You can give things to do online, but really if you're talking about the way somebody speaks and tongue placement, there really needs to be a video component of that to really engage in speech therapy. So we're looking at different ways that we can provide some of those video services as well to meet the requirements that we know about right now, and continue to wait. As you said, Mark, it's a waiting game to determine, you know, what will those services look like over summer. And, you know, there again, mandated to provide these service times, it's going to be probably an additional expense to staff to be able to provide those services if we're, you know, given the direction to do that in. So we're just waiting to see.
Yeah, no, and I get all of that. I guess I'm just saying, I know that some of our contracts with outside service providers are, you know, quite large, you know, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 for one student, because they're, you know, they have very unique needs. And so I'm just saying, are we kind of taking a look at that and saying, hey, if we had a contract with an outside service provider for one student for $80,000, and in March they shut it down and they're not providing the same service because of the virus, you know, are we at least taking a look at that and saying, hey, are you able to prorate? Or I don't know how we pay that. I don't know if we pay that monthly or whatever, but I guess I'm just saying, you know, let's just take a look and see, are there any situations like that where maybe the services aren't being provided to the same level, so there needs to be an adjustment in the fee?
Yeah, I mean, I just got from Gina that she has confirmed with each of the programs that they're providing the services. So when I meet with her, I will definitely, we'll continue to talk about that for sure. But she is on top of that. So
okay, great. And then lastly, Joelle, the flat fee from David Riley for the building project, I thought that did qualify for usage of bond funds.
We'll have to go back and double check that. I know that you guys had the option of paying it monthly or doing the flat fee, and you guys chose to do the flat fee. And I don't remember the rest of that conversation, so I apologize. But I will look that up and see if that fee was paid out of bond money.
well, and we may have to we'll look at that, Joelle, because I'm almost getting monthly bills then. I'm not sure what, but those are, and they're different. Like there's some that are flat fee, but they're flat fees, not TIF ones or other things. Like the other ones, those ones have detail on them. Sure. So some of them are just, so I guess I thought that they were on a monthly plan because of how they're coming in. So we probably just we'll circle back on them.
Well, yeah, maybe, you know, just take a look at it. My recollection is that the legal services that David was providing us specifically for the building project qualified for being paid out of the bond funds, and that's what we were doing.
If we can, we'll move the expenditures. Like I said, we'll take a look at it. That's not a problem. But if that is the case, okay, then we can just move them pretty easily.
Okay, maybe you can follow back up with the board when you guys get answers on that.
Yep.
Great, thanks.
Anything else?
Roll call.
Mr. Dosen?
Yes.
Mrs. Kramer?
Yes.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mrs. Wigman?
Yep.
Mrs. Mack?
Yes. Item 12, closing items. We have A, announcement. So we've decided, unless something changes, that we'll be having another meeting next Wednesday, which I think somebody said was April 29th at 5 o'clock. And on that agenda, we'll be discussing refunds. And there's various refunds we were going to discuss. And we had a second item, which was our distance learning plan. And it would be helpful, Mr. Martin, if you're still here, that you would be able to give a summary of how that came about and what the reasons were that some of the items are the way they are.
So
Okay.
the work session piece of that, though, you're only looking at necessarily one agenda item. The other agenda item would be just discussion, not necessarily voting, correct? For like the refund part, the pay to participate, all of those things, that's mostly just discussion. And then
Right.
the voting item would be the plan, correct?
Right.
Okay.
Do we have to
Meaning-
vote on that? Wait a minute, though. Do we have to vote on that plan? Is that
Well-
is that a change to our manual and our policy in that manual?
Well,
Operating
no,
policies?
No, Kathleen, today we were going to vote on it. We were going to board approve the distant learning plan. So
Right.
since we're teeing it up again next week and we're going to have a walkthrough, we want to, assuming everybody's on board with it, we want to approve it, board approve it, I think.
Right.
Just the learning plan. Yeah.
Just the learning plan, right?
Yeah, thank you. for Clarification.
Okay.
May I have a motion to adjourn?
One thing I'd like to announce, if you don't mind.
Go right ahead.
Short and sweet. Friday is the 100th birthday of a longtime high school principal in Brecksville Broadview Heights School, Bud Wisniewski. And the reason it's kind of special to me is he's my wife's cousin. And Bud's very much loved by the folks, including Mayor Ruby, who was in my sister's graduating class. And Bud was the principal at that time. So this coming Friday, April 24th, will be his 100th birthday.
That's awesome. Thank you, Fred, for sharing that. And happy Earth Day to everybody.
Happy Earth Day.
Okay, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, roll call?
Mr. Dosen,
Yes.
Mrs. Kramer,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mrs. Wigman,
Yes.
Mrs. Mack.
Yes. You will now be adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Thank
Take
you.
care all. Stay
Great
safe.
job,
Stay
Craig.
healthy.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Stay safe.